Good morning and welcome to this meeting of the Resources and Transformation Overview and Scrutiny panel. I am Councillor Alan O'Sullivan, Chairman of the panel. Please note that this meeting is broadcast live on the Council's website and on YouTube. It will remain available for a minimum of 12 months. Please could those present please switch their mobile devices to silent. If the fire alarm sounds, please use the nearest fire exit and go to the assembly point in the car park. Members are requested to introduce themselves during the meeting, if not already done so. First of all, apologies.
We have received apologies from Councillors Dunning and Ward. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 1 on the agenda is the minutes of the last meeting. Do members approve the minutes of the last meeting? Thank you. Item 2, declaration of interest. Any? No, thank you. Item 3. Oh, sorry.
Just to say, I'm a member of Hivenden Parish Council, and Citizens Advice Bureau do have an office within our parish council offices, so I don't know if that needs noting.
Oh, okay. No, not that. Yes, Joe.
I'm Mayor of Lymington and Pennington, and I think the transformation strategy will impact us, so I put that.
It'll impact everybody.
Okay, everybody, yeah, okay. Right. Go on to the first item on the agenda then, which is Citizens Advice and New Forest update and future funding. And welcome to Jeremy and Neil. Thank you. I think that's it. Ryan,
thank you, Chair.
Yeah.
So good morning, everyone. I'm Ryan Stevens, Service Manager for Revenues, Benefits and Customer Services. This report is an introduction to the annual presentation which will be provided by Citizens Advice New Forest and provides information on the current funding agreements that we have with them. The Council has provided funding over a 3-year period, which is due to end on the 31st of March 2025. The current funding for this year being £195,306. This funding agreement is to enable Citizens Advice New Forest to plan and budget ahead, and with the certainty of this funding being able to apply for further grant funding and project work to support our residents across the district. Citizens Advice New Forest are requesting a further funding agreement, provide that future security, and for the panel to consider this today with a recommendation to the portfolio holder for inclusion in the medium-term financial plan. So I'll now pass you over to Neil Young, Chief Officer of Citizens Advice New Forest, who will provide their annual update.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting us and the continued support that we receive from New Forest District Council. We have had quite a busy year, as you would probably expect, and I'm just going to take you through some of the work that we've been doing over the last 12 months. Just to remind members, we are an independent charity but are federated to the National Citizens Advice Organisation. We are independent and we take our independence very seriously. I'd like to start by just reminding you of our mission. As a charity, we've spent some time really looking again at our mission to ensure that we are really reflecting the demands of the people of the New Forest. And as you'd expect, sustainability is always the key element to our work. And so we want to ensure that we are relevant and accessible to the people of the New Forest. And you'll see through the presentation this morning that we are really doubling down on our efforts to make sure that we are as accessible as possible. And also that we're adapting to the changing demands of the community that we serve. Our key priorities as a charity, we launched our 3-year business plan last year, and there are 4 key areas of priorities. So building our services, which are about building new services which will really benefit our clients. And you'll see that we've got a couple of new projects which are really starting to show some real impact. We are really committed to working in partnerships, so we work across the New Forest with a lot of different partners, including New Forest District Council, but also with the voluntary sector, but also with our with our other colleagues in other parts of Hampshire, to be able to deliver programmes which give growth across Hampshire as well as here in the New Forest. As you would imagine, we're very lucky to have some very dedicated staff and volunteers, and we want to grow those people. So later on, you'll hear about kind of some of the work that we do to support our volunteers and staff. And obviously creating sustainability and making sure that, we can continue to deliver our services so that we can ensure that everyone gets the help that they need. And we've done this in a number of different ways, and you can just see some of those listed in the presentation below. But how do we do this? Well, as I said earlier, we are key in delivering in partnership. We work with a range of partners to deliver our advice services. But these partnerships are crucial to ensure that our clients get the help that they need from the right people. And we often signpost people to other services because they are better equipped to deal with the particular issue that some of the clients are facing. And often our advisors are the bridge and to bridge the gap between services as well. So some of the activities that we do to deliver this is attend the community hubs across the New Forest, and we're looking at how we can develop that further. We liaise with our colleagues in the housing benefits and council tax team when we've got clients who are maybe struggling with their council tax or their benefits that they're receiving. We are one of the biggest referrers to our food banks across the New Forest. We do over 100 vouchers a month to different people, but also signpost to other support in the New Forest. And we also work as part of the New Forest Poverty Action Group that are looking at how we can tackle some of those drivers of poverty here in the New Forest. So I wanted to start by introducing you to one of our clients. This is Sarah. She is an example of one of the people that we help. And as you can see, we've helped over 6,500 people with around 19,500 issues. And Sarah's story shows how we help people solve their problems and why this is so important. So what do? We help people with a range of issues. And often what we find is people will come with one issue, we'll sit down with them, we'll work with them, and we'll find that they've got other issues. And as you can see on the presentation, most people who come to us will have, on average, around 3.5 problems on average. So we will work with them to overcome them and look at how we can help them and empower them to be able to take control of the situation that they're faced with. If we look at Sarah's story, Sarah was struggling with her debt. She was behind in paying her rent. The threats of being evicted was making her very anxious. And this is something which we see a lot of with our clients. Mental health has a huge impact on some of our clients. And as a single parent, she was worried about how she was going to support her family and her children. So we were able to work with her. And Chris, one of our advisors, helped Sarah with her problems. One of the first things that we do is we will often do a benefits check with our clients to understand whether they're receiving all the money that they're entitled to. And this put added pressure on her finance. She's struggling to pay all her bills, leading to the overall debt increase. Now, many of our clients come to us in many different ways, and you'll see there we've highlighted some of the ways in which people get in contact with us. As you'll be aware, we have 5 offices around the New Forest, as well as attending some of the community hubs as well. But we also have a dedicated advice line, which is answered by people here in the New Forest, as well as our web chat and our email service as well. So, as I said earlier, we were able to give practical help to Sarah by actually helping her to complete the forms that she needed for the disability benefits that she was entitled to. We helped her write a letter to her landlord to set up a payment plan to deal with some of the debts that she had. And this stopped her landlord trying to evict her, which had huge impact. Together they worked out a budget, so we do a lot of budget work and managing debt and get support with her energy costs as well. So you'll see later that we have some projects within our service where we can access specialist support. But as you can see, most of the people that we see have multiple and complex problems, and we can deal with most of the issues or know somewhere to refer them on to. But the difference that we make is huge. You know, we see lots of people, and hopefully most of them feel that they walk away feeling less stressed, depressed or anxious as a result of the help that they receive from us. If we go back to Sarah's story, our advice helped stabilise Sarah's financial situation. She's got support from a social prescriber. We work quite closely with the health sector and can signpost people to things like social prescribers to get the mental health support that they might need. And through our support, Sarah's been able to increase her income by £125 a week, which is huge. This slide just highlights just highlights the top areas where we were asked for help in 2023-2024. Benefits and tax credits are the biggest, followed by charitable support, which is around food banks. We are seeing a huge amount of people with debt, which is partly the tail from the cost of living crisis that we've seen, and I think that will continue for some time. Housing continues to be a challenge, and I'm sure you are aware of some of the challenges that we have here in the New Forest, and then issues with utility bills and so on. So those are just some of the issues. We have a lot more that we deal with on a day-to-day basis. So you will appreciate that we wanted to look at how we can calculate our financial value. What impact do we have to support our wider community? So the National Citizens Advice has been working with the Treasury to approve a new model to show how we have impacted. And from our robust management information, we've also separately considered the financial benefits of the people that we help as well. So this is things like keeping people in employment, preventing housing evictions, reducing demand for mental health services, improving mental well-being and positive functions, and improving family relations, because that's a big issue for us. So it is estimated that for every pound that is invested here in the New Forest, we generate around £2.98 in savings to governments and public services. And then in the wider economic and social benefits, it's about £20.36. And then to the individual, it's around £9.86. So for every pound that is spent, £9.86 we return to the people we help. So how do we manage as an organisation? We are extremely lucky to have around 65 volunteers, and we're always getting requests from new people to come and volunteer for us. So we are very lucky. We estimate it's around 17,000 hours, enabling us to reach as many people as we do. And of course, there's considerable benefits for those people that do volunteer as well. Not just kind of employment. We have a lot of students that come and work with us. It also gives a sense of well-being and also better well-being for them as well. Our trained volunteers save us around £444,000 each year, and that figure's worked out through a piece of work that's been done with the Bayes Business School Charities Centre of Effectiveness, which has formulated that figure. And we employ around 30 staff. The majority of those staff work on what we call our projects, and I'll talk a little bit more about our projects in a moment. Just to give you an idea of kind of how we are funded, obviously we're very grateful for the funding that we receive from New Forest District Council, but we also try to ensure that we are not just reliant on one particular funder, so that we can be sustainable for the future. And this just shows you how we are funded at the moment. We have a very big national lottery debt project which we deliver across Hampshire, and I'll talk a little bit more about that a little bit later on. But as you can see, we've got a number of different projects that we deliver. Over the next 3 years, we have started to look at our kind of financial planning, and you would expect me to say that inflation will continue to impact on the cost of delivering our advice services. We are working on a deficit budget for this year. This is partly because we are going through an IT upgrade, so we have decided to invest some of our reserves to improve the IT. IT is always changing, but it's important that we invest in that so that we can deliver our services moving forward. And also we're undergoing a review of our services so that we can look at how we deliver our services more in the community, as I've already mentioned. For 2025-26, although we're still working through what the budget will look like, we anticipate that that will be a balanced budget. But we do have some challenges. Our project funding, some of our projects will come to an end at the end of next year. We've also got to look at some of our offices. The lease comes up in Lymington in 2026. So there's question marks about what will happen there. But we're also looking to invest in our income generation so that we can bridge some of those gaps. And then 2026, 2027, which is a bit further on, we're already, we'll need to look at kind of new funding, new technology to deliver advice services, etc. So there is big things that, we need to keep mindful of as part of our challenges. So I just thought I'd just talk you through some of the projects that we deliver. You saw in that big about our funding. We have a Macmillan project, which is funded by the charity Macmillan, which is for supporting people who have a cancer diagnosis, really to look at their kind of income maximisation and benefits. And we're looking at how we can support them, because often for many people who have got that diagnosis, they're not able to work. So how can they access funding to be able to sort of live really? We have an energy advice project, which looks at how we can support people with their energy costs. And we do an assessment of their tariffs and so on to support them to make sure that they're getting the best funding. Our financial inclusion work, we have 3 financial inclusion workers that work in our food banks in Ringwood and in Waterside, the 2 Trussell Trust food banks in the New Forest. And earlier this year, we started a brand new project where we are looking at we have a school financial inclusion worker working in 8 schools in the Fordingbridge and Ringwood area. Now, this is a new project that we've just brought online, and we're seeing real benefits to it. The schools are referring families who are struggling. They might not necessarily have been accessing our services historically, and we're working with them to look at whether they are getting access to the funding that they maybe could benefit from. We're currently undergoing a evaluation of this project with the University of Southampton to just see how effective it is. But the early signs are really, really positive. We're really seeing the families are really benefiting from that work, so which is very, very encouraging. And I think the schools are finding it beneficial as well, which is really helpful. So I just introduce you to Jessica, who's another one of our clients. She was a single parent. She came to us, to one of our offices. She was really struggling to support her family. She was receiving benefits, but after meeting our advisors, we were able to help her. She had a disability, which meant that she was entitled to personal independent payments. So we helped her complete all those forms, helped her to go forward. Because often what people do when they complete things like personal independent payments is that they think of themselves, they apply when on their very best day rather than on their very worst day. And often without the right support, they won't get those benefits. So we support people to really kind of challenge them to think about how they cope in at home when they're having a bad day with their health condition. So the support that we gave Jessica improved her mental health and increased her income. So seeing some real benefits from that. A few other of our other projects our money in debt. So we have two, as I've already mentioned, we have two debt projects. We have the Money and Pension Service debt project, which is really 2 appointments where we can work with clients and help them with their debt and help them with things like debt relief orders, etc. And then the other one that we have is a Hampshire-wide debt project that we deliver as part of our membership to Citizens Advice Hampshire. And we deliver that project, but this is for more vulnerable people with bigger debts. And we will spend a lot more time supporting those people. Home and Well is a project where we support people as they return home from hospital who maybe had difficulty. And then we obviously have our generalist advice service, which is what our volunteers deliver, which is advice on a whole range of issues. But what we can always do with our generous advice is if there's a particular need, we can refer them into any of our projects to really support our clients. This is Steve. Steve was a pensioner who came to us. His mental health had really hit rock bottom. You're probably seeing a theme that mental health is a massive issue for us. We see a lot of people with quite a lot of anxiety, suicidal thoughts, etc. He was really struggling with he wasn't receiving all the money that he was entitled to. So the first thing we did was we got him a food parcel so he could actually eat, and also helped him to apply for his state pension because he wasn't claiming his state pension. And through that support, he no longer needs to use the food bank and is getting the money that he would get from his pension, along with some housing benefits so that he can support himself living alone in the community. So what for the future? Well, as I've mentioned, we are currently in the process of concluding a review of our advice services to support more residents here in the New Forest. We want to grow our specialist services to meet the needs of our community, and that's really how can we develop programmes like our school financial inclusion to really meet the needs of reaching out to other groups who maybe need our help, who are maybe not sure or not confident about getting out and talking to us. Because often coming through the door to our offices can feel a little bit of intrepidation. So we want to make it as easy as possible. So we're looking at how we can deliver our advice in the community a lot more. And we also believe it's key for us to work in partnership to ease the pressure on those struggling with the cost of living. So we can do some of the work, but actually we need to work with the wider New Forest community to make sure that we're accessing for those clients the services that they need. Thank you very much for listening. Any questions?
Thank you very much, Neil. And that answer is very informative and shows the wide range of things that you cover.
Thank you.
Jack?
Thank you, and thank you for a very good report. The financial inclusion service for the schools looks like a really fantastic project, and clearly it's having an impact. And I think it would be something that I'd love to see in my neck of the woods in Lymington and Pennington, and it's something definitely in Pennington schools would be much appreciated. The money that NFDC provides, is that enough?
I mean, the school, just to answer, the school financial inclusion project is being funded through a charity that's been set up in the Ringwood area called Staff, which is for 3 years to fund it, to really prove the concept and to make sure that we've evaluated it. We couldn't deliver the school financial inclusion as well as the generalist advice based on, how much it costs for that member of staff. I mean, we work with 8 schools, so we've got one full-time member of staff. She works 30 hours, and that covers the whole of term time. So we couldn't deliver that and deliver our generous advice on the funding we receive from NFDC. So we would look for other funding to be able to deliver that.
As a new member of this panel, I read through the briefing notes, and there was a lot of questions that weren't in the briefing notes, but thank you for the presentation, because a lot of those questions that I had have been answered. But I would like to know, I do have a colleague who has worked for your organisation in the past.
Yeah.
And her frustration was the amount of training she got. So how do the finances stack up with the amount of training that you're able to give your volunteers on these various issues?
So as a organisation, you wouldn't. We're not the sort of when people volunteer, it's not the sort of role where you just kind of turn up and can see clients. It's all we have to have training. As part of our membership to Citizens Advice National, we have a whole stream of training programs that are supplied as part of that membership to that organisation on a system called Skillsbook. But we receive loads of different questions, and if a volunteer is meeting with a client, what we don't want to do is to make anyone feel unable or unequipped to be able to answer those questions. So we do have quite a rigorous training program because the questions that we receive are so rigorous. So I appreciate it is, for some people, it's not, it is quite a challenge. But it's also important that if we're getting people coming through asking us questions, we are giving our volunteers and staff the right tools to be able to answer those questions.
So are you happy with your present level of funding to support your ongoing training programme?
The training programs that we develop are all funded as part of our current model.
Thank you.
Alice?
Yeah, I would echo Councillor Davies's point with regards to the project engaging with local schools. Like Councillor Davies, there are schools within my wider parish area that would really benefit from that project. Not too far from, as I say, the food bank in South Waterside and Blackfield, and areas of deprivation within the wider Hythe and Dibden area. So any funding, be it project work or otherwise, that could continue for that project would be hugely valued here in the east and over in the Waterside. I just wanted to ask, with regards to the lottery funding that's ongoing, is there a ceiling when that stops, or is that something you have to reapply for? Because obviously 26% of your contributions comes from the lottery for the debt advice programme, but I wonder if that's something you have to reapply for. And I also wanted to ask, since the government's winter fuel cuts, have you received a lot more questions and queries and concerns over how they can get support, and indeed how to apply for pension credit and advice? Because I imagine that might have highlighted and extended the workload for you and your team. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll answer the first question. So the Hampshire Debt Project is due to finish, the funding is due to finish at the end of next year. We're delivering that in partnership with Citizens Advice Hampshire, which is a consortium of all the Citizens Advice across Hampshire. So we will be, over the next period, working with our colleagues to look at whether we can seek further funding from the National Lottery to continue to deliver that project. So we have a bit of time, but we do intend to try to extend that if we possibly can, because we are seeing the real benefits of that work, and it's quite intensive work that we do with our clients through that project. So yes, we hope to extend that, but we'll need to wait and see how far we can take that. In regards to your second question, which was about the tax credits and the winter fuel allowance, we have, as a rule, worked with Ryan on an annual basis to write to clients, to write to people who may be entitled to tax credits, pension tax credits anyway, and a letter goes out. I think it's about 100 people that go out, and they're referred into us. But we are seeing more and more people concerned about this, and my understanding is that there's a piece of work going on nationally within national government around some additional support for organisations to be able to support people who maybe should be accessing pension credits that aren't.
And you wanted to come in and clarify a couple of points.
Thank you, Chair. No, just really encouraging observation that you've got a balanced budget over the next few years. Just for panel's awareness, obviously the MTFP for the council is not in that position, so whilst we'd be happy to help where we can, we obviously have to consider that against other priorities and considerations, so just making that clear to members. Thank you.
Alan?
Thank you. Yeah, Councillor Alan Alvey from Blackfield. I don't have a specific question. I just want to say that from my experience of working with citizens' advice at the parish council and with local charities on the water side, I'm very supportive of continuing funding for this organisation. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex.
Sorry. Sorry, Councillor Davis. I didn't find that, Councillor Jack Davis. So firstly, the impact that Hampshire County Council's cuts will have on Citizens Advice Hampshire, and then obviously that comes down to you, is going to have a big impact. On another note, and this is just for plugging, the Lymington and Pennington Town Council have our grants scheme open at the moment. If you're doing any specific projects in that area, you're more than welcome to apply.
Thank you very much.
Just one more new question as a newcomer. I noticed the slides on the financials. How healthy is your balance sheet at the moment?
We have a reserves policy which we are meeting, and we have a little excess above that as well. So it's healthy.
Any figures on that? Or?
I would be on the top of my head. I can supply those though.
Thank you.
Over the years, when you've come and presented to us, I've always, I think I've asked this question before, and I think it'd be interesting to see, and you might have some anecdotal evidence about within your 5 areas, how is it split with the amount of work you do? Is it consistent around these areas? Is there any particular area of the district where there's maybe more people with debt concerns or fuel concerns, or is there a sort of a stronger area for your workload? And I would also add that I always feel that you don't get enough from any organisation, and for what you do, you shouldn't have to. But it's almost as necessary evil, providing the answers with a head, the finances. But you've proved there that that's £2.98 savings from government services. So there is, that early intervention prevention does lead to benefits for wider services and cost. And as you say, the £20.36. Under wider national services as well. So you do create that long-term benefit, and that should be highlighted for anyone who looks at the financials. But really, you are a godsend and an absolute lifesaver for what's it, 6,000 odd people. Amazing.
Thank you very much. To answer your question, I mean, I think we have very different areas of the New Forest, and part of the reason that we're undergoing this review is because we feel that there is areas, particularly on the water side, I would say, and actually Fording Bridge as well, where we're probably not reaching the people who need our support in the way that they could be accessing. So that is part of the reason why we've decided to do the review, so that we can look at a slightly different model for delivering our services, so that we can reach those communities, because we all know that the New Forest can be a bit of a challenge when it comes to public transport. And so from our perspective, making sure that we reach those communities. I would say that debt is actually a big issue across the forest. And actually, that is going to be the tale of this cost of living crisis that we've gone through. But each community has slightly different nuances and different demands, and so I kind of wouldn't want to highlight which bits, but it particularly, I mean, one thing we are now starting to see is the demand for food vouchers is not increasing. I would say it's sort of plateauing, but it's still quite high.
Thank you. In your presentation, you say that 41% is face-to-face. Is that declining or increasing?
It's probably increased. because of the fact that we were coming out of the pandemic. So last year we were a bit lower, but we are seeing an increase. But that is more about because a lot of people were very kind of nervous about coming out. But now they're starting to feel a lot more confident about coming to our offices and so on. So yes, it's probably slightly increased, but probably based on the pandemic, really.
So in New Milton, you've just come out of the shop front and
Yes.
you've now gone into the town council offices. Have you publicised that enough that members of the public now know that that's there rather than coming to the office and not?
Yes, we have done some publicity. We need to do some more, but we are now. We wanted to make sure that we embedded it. We've only literally been there 3 weeks, so we're just starting to move forward. But yes, we will do some more work there to publicise that.
Thank you. Members, part of the recommendation is whether CAB is giving us value for money, and also whether we think the recommendation of the amount of years that we should be offering that. Should it be the 3 years that we've did before, or should we do it differently? What do members think? Alice?
I think firstly maintaining the funding with the inflation uplift each year is the sensible option. But I also think possibly looking at a 5-year settlement probably makes a bit more sense, just because I think we should be thinking long term on this. This is an organisation that delivers, I think, savings to the council, because there's a lot of services that overlap and a lot of services they do, which then mean we don't have to do. And I think that's a financial benefit to this council, but also a benefit to our communities across the forest. And speaking obviously from a perspective of Lymington and Pennington, they're based in the district council offices, although I'm obviously the future of the town hall is up for discussion. So that will have an impact, possibly a financial impact on citizens' advice if they have to relocate. So I think it's something that we should be looking at a long-term funding settlement for them.
Alex?
Yeah, I would echo Councillor Davies with that, and inflation rising year on year. I think as much as I would like to probably offer more and beyond that, the amount of work they do and the savings that they bring to the council, I am reassured, and I think, Ryan, correct me if I'm wrong, but we still would offer funding for specific projects during that time as well, which at least provides some other additional support on specialised projects. That's correct.
We have utilised some government funding before to work in partnership with Citizens Advice on things like debt, cost of living, benefit claimants, so would be dependent potentially on other grant funding.
Alan?
Thank you. Yeah, I would just reiterate what I said earlier. I would support continuing funding. I would support inflation increases in that funding. But my own view, but I'd take advice on it, is that we should stick with the 3-year settlement and, review it. I think 5 years is, a bit long. Thank you.
Okay.
Again, I'm happy to take advice on this, but I'd also ask for Citizens Advice's own input on this, on whether they would prefer a longer term settlement. Obviously, they are biased in that regard, but obviously it would be a case for both them and for the council to look at and say if a longer term settlement is beneficial.
Any other members have any comments on that? No.
Yes, I think we should stick with the 3 years. We shouldn't go into another administration. We should stick with the people making the decisions at this time.
Are you saying you're going to lose control?
So, thank you, members. We'll take that those comments in the board, and following that, the recommendation on page 5 is that the panel make a recommendation to Portfolio for Finance and Corporate on the future funding Citizens Advice New Forest. So we agreed to go forward with what we've said. So we agreed that the value of the money, and we've more or less agreed the term that we want to be able to go forward with, which is 3 years. Is what I've heard the majority.
I think, Chairman, the idea of this report is to capture member panel comments, so we don't necessarily need a consensus. But I think we've had the portfolio holder in the room as well, so he's heard the comments, he's heard the debate, and I think the next step is to take this into cabinet arena thereafter.
Okay, so
I would like to say on record that it should be up to obviously the portfolio holder, but I would like them to investigate a longer term funding settlement if viable.
okay, we'll leave that to the portfolio holder from our recommendation. Okay. Right, thank you very much. Won't make us sit through the rest. Thank you. Right. We now move on to item 5, which is the procurement review of contract standing orders. Yes.
Hello everyone, I'm Josie West, I'm the Strategic Procurement Manager. I took up the role in April this year and have completed a review of our contract standing orders, which hadn't been subject to a full review since 2018. So the review incorporated a benchmarking exercise against 10 comparable councils in the South. It also took into account feedback from the leadership team and from their nominated officers who are involved in the procurement process. And it also took into account the upcoming legislative changes from the Procurement Act 2023, which was due to come into force towards the end of October. However, on Thursday of last week, after I submitted this report to panel, the Cabinet Office advised that it would be delayed now until February 2025. So I am still intending on proposing the internal changes to go ahead in October as planned, but any reference to the regulations will need to therefore wait until February or such time as the regulations go live. In terms of the changes proposed, we're proposing an increase of our transparency threshold. That is the point at which we advertise all our tenders openly, from 50,000 to 100,000, with a requirement for any request for quotations up to that value to include at least one supplier from the local and surrounding areas. We're also proposing provision of a breaches order to ensure that any non-compliance is reported to the Statutory Officers Group and to Audit Committee. It also provides a bit more guidance to officers for evaluating bids and a requirement that for all contracts above 100,000, 5% of the evaluation of the quality evaluation must be allocated to climate and sustainability initiatives. Thank you.
Thank you. What happens if you can't find somebody local to do it?
Yeah, it's stipulated where at all possible, and we've defined local as to be having a VH, SO or SP postcode. So it includes the wider area, but it is only where possible.
Thinking something, and it's probably above the top level, but like rocks coming from Norway, there won't be many local tenderers for that.
No, like I say, it's where possible.
Alex?
I always bring up two kind of examples here. The first is the Milford beach huts where the wrong grade of stainless steel was used and it cost council obviously money down the line. And the second is preventing corruption effectively of officers. And obviously the officers here are fantastic, but it has been an issue obviously in the past where the procurement process perhaps hasn't been as stringent as we'd like it to be. How does this policy firstly prevent or improve quality control? And secondly, how does it prevent instances of corruption? I worry about the up to 15k with just the officer, because that then leaves the officer on their own dealing with it. There's a lack, I worry about the lack of scrutiny there. And then the 100k threshold in terms of advertising. So how does that it's quite a difficult one, I'm sure, but how does that tackle the kind of the issues we've had in the past on this council?
So in terms of scrutiny, we do run spend analysis reports 3 times a year. That's been increased in frequency following that incident. So all service managers and senior managers scrutinise the expenditure within their services. Also, when the regulations go live, we will be legally required to complete a conflict of interest assessment for any procurement above the national thresholds. So that will be something that becomes part of our processes going forward.
On the quality control side of things, because obviously this is about financials, I know it might not come under this policy, but is there remit within this policy to try and improve quality control?
So in the last year, we've added some contract relationship officer roles. So we have a contract relationship officer now for every directorate, and part of their role is where previously we've supported with a procurement process up to contract award. Their role continues throughout the entire procurement process, including that contract monitoring. So they're ensuring that we're doing quarterly contract reviews with suppliers, measuring KPIs and making sure that we're getting what was specified in the contract.
Al?
Thank you. Yeah, I have a number of questions and comments, so I'm sorry if it's going to take a bit of time. To start with, under contract modifications, item 15. Firstly, I don't know what you talk about, a maximum percentage value of modification. I'm not clear what that percentage is. And secondly, the change that you're proposing could lead to an almost exponential increase in contract values, subject only to review by the executive management team. I think there should be upper limits on the total value of the contract based on the proposed thresholds in this procedure, and that if you go over that threshold, you then have to go back to the relevant sign-off as set out in the financial regulations. So that is one change I would like to see. Can you tell me what is the percentage, maximum percentage allowed?
For goods and services, it's up to 10%, and for works, it's up to 15%.
Sorry, 15%?
Yeah. This is the legislation at the moment.
Okay.
And it says that with unforeseen circumstances, it could be up to 50%.
Right. So, you know, you take my point that if you start off with, say, a £50,000 contract, very quickly under this, it could reach a threshold. And I'm saying if it reaches that threshold, it should then go back for sign-off by the authority laid down.
Yeah, so any contract modifications do go through an approval process, and they have to be approved by the service manager and the service accountant as well, and that's signed and recorded. And in any event, it would have to be in line with financial regulations, and there must be budgetary provision there. We're also proposing that we monitor contract modifications and report them to EMT annually.
Okay, but I'm saying that I think it should go back. If it takes it up to the next authority level, you should go back and get that authority. It shouldn't just be an ongoing process of getting bigger and bigger.
Yeah, so it would go, at every point, it would go back to the service manager and corporate accountant.
Okay, but okay. I'm not sure you're understanding what I'm saying. I mean, if you get to a threshold level of 100,000, if you start off with a low level contract, gets up to 100,000 level, it then should go to the next approval stage.
Right, I see what you're saying. Would you read into it?
I think from my perspective, Jem, if I can, I think, again, it's a really valid observation, Councillor Alvey, thank you. If we can take that on board, because obviously there is there's a supplementary approval route for this. So again, this is undertaking panel comments at this point. I think we can take that on board and feed that into the next round of approval.
Okay.
Thank you.
My next question is on breaches and waivers. I agree with this idea of a 6-monthly report. I have to say that I've not been made aware of any breaches and waivers to date, so I question where internal audit fit into this. I mean, is this something that they get involved in? I'm really looking, I think, at the Section 151 officer here.
Yeah, again, happy to provide an initial comment. So waivers are reported already. So there is an annual report on waivers that comes through audit committee. So there's full transparency and awareness of that. Obviously, in terms of breaches, again, that would be part of the internal audit work programme at the point that they're reviewing, say, contracts, reviewing the procurement team and function. So again, that would be picked up, but only part of the cyclical audit plan. I think, again, the intention within this is to really firm up on that reporting on breaches so that it's more regularised and then it's brought to the attention of the statutory officers group at the earliest opportunity. So again, it's really firming up here what we're intending to do going forward.
All right, thank you for that.
Thank you. Yeah.
I'm making this excuse again as a new member of the panel. Can you give us the... I'm trying to understand this. What is the bigger picture? Can you give me examples of contracts which are up and coming that this might be applied to? What sort of thing is this programme applied to?
So, for example, if we had a contract valued at £80,000, at the moment it would be advertised openly. So we might get 15 bids, 20 bids. All of those bids have to be evaluated and scored by a panel. And they'll have a number of questions that are asked of them, each of which has to be scored. And then we have to provide an assessment to each of the bidders. So we're saying that depending on the situation of the contract, we're setting the minimum standard that it would be a request for quotation for up to 3 bidders only. So rather than evaluating and scoring up to 15, 20 bids, it would be a maximum of 3. But we're sort of countering that with the fact that at least one of them, where possible, must be in the local area. So we're supporting those local, small, medium-sized enterprises.
And can you give me an example of one that you're involved in at the moment?
God, could be a programme of repair works to housing properties, for example, that sort of thing. So minor. Yeah. Yeah, and that also gives us more time to focus on the high risk above the national threshold contracts, which under the new regulations are going to be under increased obligations.
So these repair works I'm seeing as they come into the council offices, that's been done and gone, has it? That's gone through the programme.
Yes, it has, yeah.
And so that this doesn't have any effect on that.
Not those works that are already going ahead now. No.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Was that me or Councillor Wade? No. Age before beauty. On the point just made, so I'm assuming this is effectively to save time to be able to focus on the higher level contracts. Okay, and it's meeting government legislation as it currently stands.
Correct.
Obviously, if government legislation changes, we'll have to change, such as life. But I assume that's what it's for then.
Yeah, that's correct.
Alex.
Thank you. I haven't mentioned Alex Wade, Hive Central. I've just got a couple of questions. It's actually a really, really good report that on such a particular subject I found quite useful to read and a lot of fun. So thank you for that. And obviously you can't be held accountable for what the government do seconds after you've put it in. I wanted to ask with regards to the role of the contract relations officer, and if we go into a contract with an organisation, or we've tendered, we've accepted it, and from their side of it, they've got issues, they might go to administration, have financial issues and can't meet our requirements. Whereabouts is the protection for the council, whether it financially or for our ability to go back out and start the process again, so that we don't lose out and have to pay out for services we're not getting. Also, what's in place for the council to cover all its legal requirements for emergency works where it might not be able to go through the in-depth process as in this, because there might be unforeseen issue, lots of trees coming down, for example, during a storm, and is the contract reviews and the quarterly checks, is that where we would cover quite serious complaints between who we've contracted out the works and the council on either side? And just one more point, with the contracts on purchase orders and payments, do we how much weight do we put into an organisation where they've got a 90-day agreement or a 60-day agreement? So there'll be people we pay annually, monthly, and I've worked for other organisations where that's considered because it's sort of how much, when you've got that sort of agreement to pay, as opposed to how much, how soon they ask for you to pay with regards to the works, if that makes sense, and particularly for what high amounts of money.
Thank you for your comments at the beginning. I apologise if I haven't remembered all your questions. The first one you mentioned about if we'd tendered a contract and then they went into administration or weren't able to perform the contract. So at the procurement process, at the part of the evaluation stage, we do undertake financial health checks on all of our suppliers. We also make sure that they've got the appropriate insurances in place. And then we always have the contract monitoring KPIs. So if they were to not meet their KPIs for 2 quarters in a row or 2 quarters within a year, we then are able to terminate that contract. You also asked a question about emergency works and what provisions we have available. So we do have a number of framework agreements set up. Framework agreement is where you've got an overarching agreement, so you're in contract with them and you've gone through the procurement process, but you're not under any obligation to give them any services or works, but you can call off from that framework agreement at any time. So we do that a lot within housing specifically. Your last question was on 60, 90. So we have 30-day payment terms as standard, and that is part of the, we do that already, but that's also in the procurement regulations that are coming into force next year as well. There was another question I've forgotten. Complaints. Could you repeat that one? Sorry.
That was just to do with, you've probably already answered it with the quarterly contract reviews and the contract monitoring officer. Is that where serious complaints from either side would be dealt with?
Yes, so a lot of our KPIs involve customer feedback. So particularly if you've got a contractor that's going out and say cleaning windows at housing blocks, they'll collect feedback from the residents, and that will be incorporated within the KPIs of the contract.
And staff feedback as well, our own staff giving feedback on a contract as well.
Yeah,
okay.
Staff and residents.
So do we have indemnity on the new contract? Indemnity insurance on the new contract too, so if they do go bust, we've got an insurance coverage for that.
Yes, yeah, we do.
And what was the second thing? Oh yeah, service managers or the officers. How often have I missed it? How often do they have to give a report to their service manager? So they're doing little 5, 6, 7, £10,000 contracts.
Oh, I see.
How often do they have to report that to the next line manager?
So for anything over 25,000, they have to complete a gateway form, which goes to the service manager for approval. So no contracts above that are procured without service manager approval. And then, of course, the service managers get the spend analysis 3 times a year, so they can see the expenditure.
And below that figure? I mean, we have had a case where it's been 10, 12, 13,000 at a time. That's somebody.
So that would be picked up by the financial monitoring by the accountancy team.
Not by the immediate manager.
So they would sign off the purchase orders.
I'll just check. There's various checks and balances here. You've got the accountancy team checking the spend to date. The budget holder signing off the invoice and things. So there would be this learning curve if there were areas of concern that would get picked up as part of that.
Yes, Jack.
I was just going to thank them for answering all our questions because we've asked some very in-depth questions, and I think they've done very well.
Excellent.
I thought I saw in the notes something about a training program. Can you give us any details of that? Is that all staff or is it just councillors that need training?
So the service managers nominate what we call contract administrators who do the procurement and manage the contracts. And obviously with the procurement regulation changes, there'll be a programme of training for them, and that can go up to members if you would like as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, members. So the recommendation on that is on item 5, on page 9, that the panel note the proposed changes to the contract standing orders, and we have provided comments that go forward. We'll now move on to item 6, the transformation programme update. Thank you, Becca.
Thank you, Chairman. So Becky Drummond, Assistant Director for Transformation. I'm very pleased to introduce to you today Ingrid Archer, our new Transformation and Improvement Manager. So the purpose of this session really is just to give you an update on where we are with the transformation programme, talk a little bit about mobilisation and give you a year 1 progress update on each of the themes. And then I will hand over to Ingrid to talk about the next steps. So in terms of mobilisation, so the business case was approved by Cabinet in August and went to Council on Monday to be fully approved. We've also now established the transformation team, so we've recruited into all posts. So that includes Ingrid as our Transformation Improvement Manager, an Organisational Design and Change Specialist, 2 Transformation Improvement Specialists already in post, and 1 who will be starting with us in October. And the 3 transformation improvement specialists will be aligned to each of the strategic directorates. And we also have a business support officer in post. We've set up governance for the transformation programme, which includes this panel in terms of scrutiny. And the big piece of work now is about a detailed programme and implementation plan to enable the mobilisation. So that's what Ingrid and the team are now working on. And that will include a piece of work around benefit realisation tracking, detailed implementation around how we're going to use resources and interdependencies of projects so that they're all correctly aligned. So in terms of progress updates on each of the themes, so on the customer and digital services theme, as members all know, customer strategy was approved by Cabinet in September. We're reviewing the current digital strategy to make sure it aligns both with the transformation strategy that was approved in December and the customer strategy. That will come back to this panel in early form in November, so in terms of the principles of that digital strategy, and then for approval in January. We're also looking at the proposed actions and quick wins coming out of the process design workshops. There was about 60 quick wins identified. Now, some of those will be genuine quick wins that we can just get on with, and the team are reviewing those at the moment. Some will be more significant pieces of work that will rely on technology. We've also approved the ICT work programme that came to this panel at the last meeting, and we've commenced the project on the digital customer software. So that's the customer relationship management platform and associated platforms around contact portal and master data management for customers. On people and capabilities, we've started to develop the people strategy, and we've got a real desire to co-design that strategy. So it's very much a New Forest District Council specific people strategy. And that will be informed by the staff survey that's recently been completed. And our staff survey was, the response rate was 57%, which is up from 41% when it was last undertaken 2 or 3 years ago. We're also starting the next tier of management development. So we've got 60 of our managers starting management development training next week. So over 3 cohorts, so 20 people on each cohort. And the organisational development and change specialist that I referred to will be now looking to prioritise embedding our values and behaviours, looking at change management and how she supports all of the services to deal with those changes and the impact of those changes. She'll also be looking at recruitment and retention strategies and making sure that we've got a really good staff engagement plan, so we bring our staff along with us at every stage of the programme. In terms of assets and accommodation, we've got an asset review that's currently in progress through a consultant called MACE. So the MACE team have been looking at all our assets and interviewing key officers about how those assets are being used, and equally as importantly is making sure that they're aligning to the transformation objectives. The initial findings have been received, with the final report anticipated in October. And those findings will inform a property strategy and action plan determining how we'll use those assets in the future. And lastly, in terms of the themes on finance and delivery, there's a piece of work that's commenced on benchmarking our fees and charges to identify opportunities. We've also, as I mentioned, starting to work on the benefits realisation tracker. And so we're developing that based on best practice and some examples that we've had from the LGA Transformation Network. And we've also re-established a Change Champions Group. So the Change Champions Group has been operating for a little while, did a lot of work with Ryan on the customer strategy. We've just brought that group together again and looking at the terms of reference and their role in terms of transformation. And we've got Councillor Steve Davis as our member champion on that group. So that's an update on each of the themes, but we're also exploring some of the quick wins that I mentioned from the process design workshops. This is just an example of them. Some of them are already in progress, so tablets for taxi drivers for their taxi driver test. Also the changes to the DBS checks for taxi drivers, and that's not to reduce the level of checks, but that's just where the checks and how the checks are undertaken. Also looking at some of our forms and some of the customer journeys on our website and how we can streamline those around the customer needs. And now I'm going to hand over to Ingrid about next step.
Yes, so good morning everyone. Ingrid Archer, I'm your newly appointed Transformation and Improvement Manager. So just to talk a little bit this morning about the approach that I'm taking to establish our team and the first few steps that we're going to use to engage with the organisation more broadly and understand some of the challenges that we have ahead. So there's kind of three levels really to what we're trying to do. We are a new team, so we're getting to know each other as individuals and our skills, and we need to set up some of the processes that we'll use to work together effectively and make sure the improvement we're delivering is recorded properly. So we're getting to know each other, we're getting to know our skills in relation to each other, and we're identifying any gaps that we would have as a team that we need to fill to make sure that we're delivering in the best possible way once we start the deployment as well. So something around our project management office and some of the standard processes that we need to put in place and make sure they align well with colleagues in ICT and other areas of the business as well. We're trying to get out there and meet as many people as possible, and you'll have to forgive me because I've only been here 2.5 weeks, but I've done fairly well in getting around and introducing myself and saying hello to some of those key stakeholders. But we want to increase that a bit as well. So we're travelling across the district to really get out and meet some of our teams that are harder to reach and aren't necessarily here at this location. Really understand their challenges. And as part of that, we also want to work closely with our Change Champions network and make sure that they feel confident and capable in delivering the change that we will ask them to lead in operational areas. So we have our first meeting with them next week. And then finally, we're looking across the organisation to take some quite high-level measures in terms of how ready are we for change? What do we need to do to put the building blocks in place so that when we are heading towards that real big transformation piece, we're ready and capable to do that part of the work. So we're going to look at our readiness as an organisation, what our initial learning needs might be so that we can put any coaching in place. And we also have our wonderful people making so many suggestions for improvement at the moment. And we want to make sure that they're captured in the right way and that people are getting responses to the suggestions that they make and that they can see those as they move through the system and take effect and have an impact on what we're doing. So yes, thank you.
So happy to take any questions for Ingrid or I.
Thank you. I notice you say on here that you're getting transformation and improvement specialists. Are there enough of them around the country that we can obtain them from perhaps other authorities, or are they, or does the specialist means they're going to be specialists within us?
We've been very lucky because we've already recruited 3. So one is coming from the private sector, but with business improvement skills and background. One from Hampshire County Council working within transformation field at the County Council, and one who was an internal applicant. We've already started making sure that their skills are supportive of the transformation programme. So 2 of the 3 are already starting some business improvement type training just to support the existing skills that they've got. So yeah, we've been lucky so far.
Thank you. I have pretty much 3 questions. The first one is under digital. The second comes under 2 come under the asset review. The first one on digital, and I know other councillors will have had this. The app, the reporting app, is going to be closed down, and the message we received was telling people to email customer services. To me, that seems a bit of a regression. Why is the app closing down? Is there any possibility or any plans, for replacing, or is it just a case of everything now goes through customer services? I thought I saw somewhere about trying to reduce email use, so I just thought that was a bit contradictory. But would you be able to give me an answer on that? If you want to answer that first, then I'll go on to the asset review after, just to make it easier.
Yeah, so Ryan's been dealing with the app, but I can tell you as much as I know, and part of that decision has been taken about the technology behind the app itself needing to be updated, the use of the app, so it's not particularly well used, but also the more strategic view of customer. So the short-term approach will be to come through customer service. There are other methods out there, including sort of different reporting apps, but longer term, this will be part of the customer strategy and the digital platform's response to what methods we give our customers and residents to be able to contact us in the easiest way.
Thank you. On the asset review, you know what I'm going to say. With the findings by mid-September, which you now say you've received the initial findings of that report, last week NFDC met with Lymington and Pennington Town Council officers to tell them effectively the lease was unlikely to be renewed. I'll be honest, I was a little bit perturbed by the way that information was relayed to district councillors, because whilst myself, Councillor Colin McCarthy, Councillor Barry Dunn and Councillor Jack Union were kind of aware that it was probably going to happen, to have the effective confirmation through by email I thought was a little bit unfair. I thought we should have been met face to face with officers to discuss that, because it's a big issue for the town council, especially in Lymington, because we haven't got the budget to go and find a new premises, and it's going to have a financial implication on the people of Lymington and Pennington if we are not able to. So first question is, will the district council assist the town council in finding new premises when this lease is up? And also bear in mind, the police who have just moved in there are going to have to move out. You've got Citizens Advice, you've got the National Park, other organisations that are going to be impacted by this. And secondly, I don't expect you to tell me, but the likely outcome for the town hall site, the town council's view, the people of Lymington and Pennington's view, is that we do not want it to just be sold off to the highest bidder, because all that will happen is Churchill or someone will come in and build another load of luxury retirement flats. That's the last thing we need in Lymington and Pennington. It's probably the best site we're going to get for affordable housing and in the Lymington area. So those are my kind of two questions on that. Will the district council assist the town council and other organisations, if needed or requested, in finding new premises or financially assisting with that? And secondly, what is the likely outcome for the town hall site? Have you got any plans yet? Although I doubt you'll put them in the public domain, but have you got any kind of indication of whether or not it's a case of looking at the bottom line on that site, or whether it's about actually using that site for other purposes? Nice light questions.
Perhaps Councillor Davies, I'll come in and help with this one, I think, first of all. So first and foremost, yeah, it's framed within the overall assets and accommodation piece. But to be slightly unfair to Becky, I think in the transformation world, because Becky doesn't have the awareness of the whole Lymington Town Hall, the project, the proposals. So all I can say at this point is that ultimately that lease for the town council specifically, it expires in March 2027. So we've started a really early conversation with the town council. So we've still got plenty of time And at this point, we are so early on in terms of that project that there aren't any firm proposals on the table. We haven't yet got anything from the MACE report that tells us what their thoughts are, because we haven't actually received that final report yet. So it's too early to answer a lot of those questions. But all I can do is give you the assurance that obviously there'll be proper consultation, there'll be proper transparency of decision making at the appropriate time for that particular project. But we're not there yet.
In response to that, can I just ask that the 4 district councillors for Lymington and Pennington, as well as the town council as an organisation, obviously I kind of cover 2 hats on that one, but in that regard, can we be consulted and engaged with at every stage of the discussion? Because the last thing we want is to not be aware until a decision has been made, in which case it's too late then to have an input on it.
I'm sure that NFDC officers will keep in direct contact with the council and the district. So that obviously that would be a logical thing to go forward rather than just sneaking up and saying, you're gone. Phil.
Again, I'm coming in my excuse as a new member of the panel. Thank you for your presentation. Very interesting, lots of things I've learned. If I talk to one of our residents about transformation, I think they'd look at me with a blank face. So the question I'm going to ask you is, if a resident asks me what's happening with transformation at NFTC, what are the 3 main messages I should be giving them?
Certainly this is around, the whole transformation programme has been centred around our customers, and by customers we mean our residents, our service users, our businesses, our visitors, to make sure that any interaction with the council is as easy as possible and done in a way that suits their needs. So that's the first biggie, I would say. The second one is about making sure that we're as efficient as we possibly can, so that we're using precious council tax money in the best way possible by making sure that we've got the right technology, the right processes in place to best serve our residents. And the third one, and you have put me on the spot, is to make sure, so one of the work streams around people and capability is to make sure that we really invest in our staff with the right skills, again, the right technology, the right processes, so that our staff can provide the best services. So that they would be my top 3, but I will reflect on those top 3.
So the 3 is customer facing, efficiency, and what was the third one again?
Staff, investing in our staff, making sure they've got the right skills, technologies, processes to be able to do their jobs in the best way, which in turn serves our community in the best way.
Okay. And has your colleague got any other views on her 3 best?
No, I'd very much echo those words, and I say it really is about value for money and making sure we're providing quality jobs for local people. So we're not asking them to fill in reams and reams of duplicated paperwork or deal with frustrated customers, that when they deal with people, it's in a real value add way. It's a corporate phrase for you, but it's that it's getting what people need to them in the quickest way possible, and people feel satisfaction in doing that.
Alex?
Thank you very much. Nice to meet you, Ingrid. Welcome to the council. I mean, we shouldn't comment as councils because we'd love to have 57% of people choose to vote for us at election time. But with the staff survey, is there a particular area of the council, maybe those who don't work in the office, who work outside, who might be maintenance staff, who aren't filling in, and that's still only just over half of the staff. So how are we making sure to engage the other 43% and understand their views and their outcomes? I'm acutely aware, I'm speaking with someone, and everyone in the room, 65% haven't voted us in, but it's important to make sure it's truly representative. And I wondered if, rightly, it's the waste and recycling staff or the maintenance staff that we're not quite grabbing as a percentage versus, say, the housing and benefits that are more office-based. On the wider strategy, I do like to, it's good to start to see specific examples in there of what you're doing. And I would point out that the main thing that I think residents want to see is really 24/7 reporting and access. within the weekend when a tree goes down on the footpath on a Saturday at 9 in the morning, it's being able to report that with the same time and confidence as you would do of a Monday morning, and accessing all areas on all types of technology. So in Fordham Bridge with an iPhone versus an iPad in Hive. On Councillor Davies's point about asset review, I wouldn't go into detail, but I just think that's where we can look at repurposing. So an office building into housing, where can larger departments go? Actually, we've got a project coming forward. We can utilise that for a different reason and repurpose rather than necessarily put it out to the market and make use of it, but in a different function that will be more reflective moving forward. And my final point is a lot of what you will decide in this doesn't need to come to councils. It's pragmatic, it's daily, it's absolutely fine. But what is the threshold for when it goes to the portfolio holder decision, service manager to panel and full council, for when actually we need to make a decision and say, actually, have a debate in the public session on behalf of residents, versus when it can be made, just as you say, as a quick win?
I will start with and you might have to remind me, but I will start with the staff survey. So yeah, we're really pleased it's 57 against 41% last time. I agree, that would be nice if it was even higher. We've done a lot of work this time round to get it to 57%, and that's included being out at the depots, filling in paper copies of the survey with our operational teams. But it's a fair point that our operational teams will always be lower in number than our office-based staff. And that's why we will look at the survey results. So it's very early days, so the survey's only just closed, but we will look at it in terms of different areas to make sure that it's representative within that area. But the organisational development and change specialist, Kate Hardy, she's also doing, as Ingrid's already touched on, she's already out and about in the district. So she was at Clay Meadow Depot at 5:30 yesterday morning, starting to talk to the operational teams about how best to engage with operational services. So we're starting to do that piece of work, and that will be a key priority for Kate. You talked about technology and 24/7. That's firmly part of the transformation strategy. And certainly the asset review, part of the review is looking at how we use all of those assets and what some of those opportunities are. And your last point. Yep. So this whole programme, this panel is Transformation Resources Panel. This panel will get an update at every meeting on the programme, including specific updates on the more significant projects, so around the CRM project, so which is both a digital project and a customer project. So significant updates will come to this panel, and this panel is also welcome to ask for specific updates on specific projects. It will also go through the governance structure, which includes a member steering board, transformation board, and this panel, and then cabinet. So no threshold as such, but you're welcome to request updates, and all significant updates will come through this panel.
Just come back onto that. So from a cost basis, if, for example, we were to dispose of an asset worth 7 figures, does that have to come to will that come to council for sign off, yay, nay, and debate or not? That's just kind of an example that I would use.
Hi, I was just going to say that absolutely all the council's normal decision-making thresholds and expectations in terms of key decisions, financial regs, they all still absolutely apply to the transformation programme. So some of the sort of operational service changes we can absolutely get on with, but once things reach the threshold, even for example, if it's a sort of service review that's fundamentally changing the way we do a service, then those need to be brought through the governance and into a political environment as any other decision.
So a really good question, Councillor Wade. I'm just going to nail down into it. So, for example, if you were going to decide on, for instance, Leamington Town Hall, other assets like that, would that go to council or portfolio holder?
Alan?
Yeah, I was going to say it would depend on the scale. So obviously the portfolio holders have a certain remit under financial regs thresholds as well. So if it's a decision within that remit, then it could go through the portfolio holder route. Most likelihood, if we're talking potential asset disposals or repurposing, it's more likely that we'd want to take that through the full transparent process.
Thank you. No more questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your presentation. It would be nice to see the customer service front face appear after you and I have worked on this for many years. Be good to see it. Thank you. Right, that's noted. We'll now move on to Silent Freeport update. Clive?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Clive Tritton, Strategic Regeneration Advisor to the Council. I've been asked to come along today to give an update on where we are in terms of the... So just got a few slides to take you through. I wasn't quite sure how much knowledge there would be about the background to the Freeport, so I've just included on the first slide a little bit of background about the Freeport. So that paragraph up there is from the original Freeport guidance back in October 2021. So Freeport's being set up as areas within the UK which have different economic regulations to the rest of the country and look to invest on specific sites through tax and customs incentives and thereby creating jobs and growth in national objectives. So first of all, to contribute towards national hubs for global trade and investment, to create hotbeds for innovation and to promote regeneration and sustainable economic growth. They're the three national Freeport objectives. There are then a number of tools which Freeports have to achieve that. Probably the most noticeable one is around the designation of tax sites. So if you are investing in a tax site, then you get tax reliefs around business rates, stamp duty, capital allowances, and so on. And therefore, there is an incentive over other areas to investing in a tax site. The second is around business rate retention. So where there is investment on tax sites over the next 25 years, above a base level, those business rates will get collected, aggregated across the area, and then reinvested in the region. And that's for a 25-year time frame from the start of the Freeport process. So that's quite a significant tool that the Freeport has. The third tool is that each Freeport got £25 million of seed capital funding. That was not specifically set out exactly how that should be used, but it was assumed it would be used to unlock infrastructure on tax sites to expedite the process of bringing them to market, to try and bring them forward more quickly. And then the final tool was around custom sites. So where there are custom sites within Freeports, potentially there is access to simplified customs arrangements. Now that's probably the least high profile, if you like, of the tools available to Freeports. I think the reason for that is that when the Freeports were originally brought in, there was still uncertainty about what the relationship would be with Europe post Brexit, because at that point there wasn't a deal with Europe. So that's the need for custom sites has been slightly offset by the fact there is a deal with Europe, but there are still custom sites within Freeports. And you'll see that on the map on the right hand side there are 8 Freeports across the country, of which obviously the Solent is one. Most of them are traditional ports, but there is also one at East Midlands Airport. In terms of our own Freeport area, the Solent Freeport, you can see there is some confusion about what the designation of the Freeport is, because Freeports have outer boundaries, and you can just see in the darker blue on that map, so the whole of the New Forest district, the Isle of Wight, and parts across Southampton and Portsmouth. That is the wider boundary of the Freeport. So that is the Freeport area. But I should be clear, the Freeport doesn't have any powers over and above anybody else across that area. The reason there is a wider boundary for the Freeport is that represents the economic geography of the area. So when it comes to reinvesting the business rates over the next 25 years, there will be an expectation that the benefit will be in that wider economic area. The only places where there are any actual legislation changes are on the tax sites, which are marked in red there. And that's really important, because there is, I have heard concerns about the role of the Freeport beyond those tax sites. There is no regulatory role of Freeports beyond those tax sites. You'll see there that the New Forest, Southampton Water, the Waterside, is due to play an enormous role in delivering the Freeport. So 4 of the parcels of land that make up the tax sites are within the New Forest district. So that's the Solent Gateway, the ABP reserve site, so they're both effectively under control of ABP, the ExxonMobil site and the Fawley Waterside site. They're the 4 tax sites that fall within, or tax site parcels of land that fall within the New Forest. The expectation, so there was a full business case put to government back in 2022. So the expectation is that within Southampton Water, those target sectors will be around port-centric manufacturing, green energy, logistics and the automotive sector. And a big part of the Solent Freeport is about unlocking capacity at Southampton Port. So Southampton Port effectively has 3 major offers. So there is the cruise terminal offer, there is the container port, and then there is the automotive sector. And it is very much about using the tax sites across the port area to unlock additional capacity. So the full business case sets out that the expectation that the Freeport will deliver 40% more capacity at Southampton. So you can see the potential contribution to economic growth that will produce. As I say, we have 4 parcels of land. That's an enormous contribution that the New Forest is expected to make to Freeport delivery. So if you look again at the full business case back in 2022, and I'm sure this is evolving, but the expectation was that the Freeport would create 16,000 jobs, 7,000 of those in the New Forest, so 44%. The expectation is that it will create just over £500 million of retained business rates to be reinvested in the area over the next 25 years. 57% of that, so 290 million coming from the New Forest. And a very large proportion of the developable land, so 70%, 303 hectares out of 430 hectares being in the New Forest. And just to say, the tax site benefits that were originally to 2027, so if you're investing on a tax site, those benefits were extended in last year's budget to 2032. So 2 different deadlines, because again, I hear these getting conflated. So the 2032 deadline, if you're an investor on a tax site, you get the benefits up until 2032. The time frame for the business rate retention being reinvested is 25 years, and that hasn't changed. So there is still the ongoing programme for the Freeport over the next 25 years in terms of the reinvestment of business rates. In terms of where we are with each of the tax sites, so by far and away the most progressed in the Southampton Water area is the Solent Gateway. They have their planning permission in place. They've moved forward. There was a launch earlier this year, and they've moved forward with the first 21 acres of hard standing. They are in the process of spending their seed capital allocation, and they're expecting to bring forward another 50 acres next year. And their sectors very much focus on those areas that I touched on earlier, so automotive, roll-on, roll-off, area around rail, supporting the rail industry, and port-focused manufacturing. The second of the 4 tax sites is then the land reserve, the ABP land reserve. That is much, much further back in the development process. So ABP have only just started to scope out their proposals for that. They expect that to be a national strategic infrastructure project, an NSIP project. So the next stages of that process is for them to start doing an option study and a master plan, concept design, and then in order for it to move forward as an NSIP project, they will need to kick off a development consent order process. They expect that process to kick off by the end of 2024, but it will be a 2-year process, they believe, to develop their thinking, and then there'll be a further 12 to 18-month decision period. So we're not expecting a decision on that site until 2028, 29. And as I say, the focus of that site is very much expected to be around the automotive sector to free up space in Southampton for their cruise and container offers. Fawley Complex, I think Stuart Neal came and talked to all members about Exxon, so I haven't said a huge amount about Exxon on here, but they announced last year a major investment on their site around low sulphur diesel and also the development of the hydrogen plant. So that is now moving forward, and we're expecting new plant to be in use early next year. And members will be aware that I think that they are also currently consulting on options around their carbon capture work. So they're a slightly different tax site because they're effectively a single owner occupier site, but they it's an important commitment from them to the area and an important role in terms of the contribution to business rate retention. And then the final tax site is around Fawley Waterside. And again, there's not a huge amount for me to add to what's probably been in the public domain previously. So members will be aware that the original planning application that we were progressing with at Fawley has been withdrawn because of their concerns around viability. So there are ongoing discussions between Fawley and the council in planning terms and the Freeport in terms of tax site designation. They're ongoing discussions which we would expect to ramp up in the months ahead. They are still saying very clearly that they're committed to bringing that site forward as part of the Freeport programme. But there is a slight concern around the seed capital because they had a seed capital allocation that at the moment they won't be able to spend because there isn't a planning permission. And that's clearly of some concern. In terms of the seed capital itself, so as I say, all Freeports were given 25 million. Those funds must be spent by March 2026 or they will be lost. And so there is some concern around a level of underspend or potential underspend. The Freeport has put out a recent call for projects, which is just closed. So we'll be hearing more in the next few weeks about the projects which may be coming forward. But that must be capital expenditure and it must be delivered by March 2026. That's quite challenging because if you don't have a planning permission or you don't have a build programme in place, that's quite a tight deadline. And it must deliver against Freeport outputs. So there'll be a lot of discussion in the next few months around that seed capital programme. In terms of retained business rates, as I say, the full business case talks about that being as much as £500 million over the next 25 years. I'm sure that figure will evolve as we move forward. But the full business case does set out what the intention is around allocating those funds. So it's across 5 areas, so 15% going into skills development, 7.5% each going into net zero and innovation, a significant proportion, so 60% going on to regeneration and site enabling, and then 10% to be agreed within local areas about how it should be spent through local investment priorities. I think it's worth noting this next slide shows the forecast for retained business rates over the next 5 years or so. The figure at the bottom is an annual figure, it's not cumulative, but it is not particularly huge. So if you look at the next 5-year programme, it's expected that business rate retention will broadly be around £11 million. Now that gets updated each quarter, and this was the early summer set of figures that I've put in here. So there isn't a huge amount expected to come forward in the next 3, 4, 5 years. It will ramp up significantly after that period if you look at the timeframes for tax sites coming forward. So the chances are that beyond this particular table timeframe, that there will be an exponential ramping up of the level of business rates that are available to be invested. I think that's a really important point because it gives us a little bit of time to really influence how we think that funding should be utilised. As I say, a very large proportion of that funding will be coming through projects into the New Forest, and I think we should have as much influence as we can as to how that's reinvested. But we have some time to do that given this time frame. We've started that process. So in April of this year, Cabinet agreed to develop a New Forest delivery plan around 4 key priority areas, which are quite wide-ranging. So I think there's a lot of scope there for what we might want to try and achieve in influencing how that business rate retention is reinvested. So that's around transport and wider infrastructure, employment and skills, prosperous communities, and environmental sustainability. So work has begun on each of those strands to pull those together into a delivery plan to bring back to Cabinet to then start setting out how we think the Freeport should be considered in terms of its legacy and whether it's been a success for this area. So just one final slide, Chair, which is around the governance. So the Freeport itself is delivered through a Freeport board. We are represented through the leader on that board. And that meets on a regular basis to drive forward Freeport business. It has 2 subcommittees, the Finance, Resource and Audit Committee and the Retained Rates Investment Committee. Again, we have representation on both of those. And then all Freeports are required to have an accountable body to make sure that there are checks and balances on how public funds are being spent. And in the Solent's case, that's Portsmouth City Council. And then in the last couple of months, the Freeport has started to move forward in terms of reflecting its full business case, which is now a couple of years old, to really start driving forward its thinking and what it's trying to achieve across those 4 key areas around trade, investment, innovation, net zero and skills. So I'm expecting a lot of engagement between the Freeport and the individual local authorities in the months ahead around those particular key areas as to what legacy looks like. So that's a bit of a run through of a lot of work from the Freeport and a lot of change over the last couple of years. It's a bit of a whistle-stop tour, Chair, but hopefully it gives you kind of a bit of background as to where the Freeport is up to.
Thank you. On the business rate retention forecast, do you know what the baseline is, or is that a guessometer as what it is? And also, is that business rate retention only in the Freeport area, or can you use it in the rest of the forest, like over the west?
Yeah, so in terms of the forecasting, when the full business case was submitted in 2022, there was a very, very large model that was put together that looked at each tax site and said, what's the likely investment in each of those tax sites and how much retained rates will that bring? And that's what totaled the 511 million that was submitted to government as part of the full business case. Clearly, those tax sites are not going to come forward in exactly the way that was expected in that full business case. So that figure will change. And in some ways, we've seen things moving forward quickly at Solent Gateway. In others, at Fawley Waterside, we've seen the process slowing down. So there is no doubt that figure will change, and I've no doubt the Freeport board will require regular updates on that. But that was the figure that was submitted to government as part of the full business case. In terms of how the retained rates can be used, that's kind of the point of the outer economic geography boundary of the Freeport. So there will be an expectation that it will be reinvested not just in the specific areas around, for example, the waterside or the other tax sites, but it can be reinvested across that entire economic geography. Now, the whole of the New Forest district is in that economic geography, so there is no reason at all. And we, one of the things we talked about in terms of our own legacy plan was around prosperous communities. There's a lot of work obviously being done on Totton at the moment, but there's no reason at all why that wouldn't be, Ringwood or Lymington or those other centres across the district, as to how we want to see the legacy and the benefits of the Freeport roll out across the New Forest. So that's a lot of the work that needs to be done around influencing how that funding is spent going forward.
Thank you.
Forgive me if I'm not optimistic. I have not really been a fan of the Freeport for a long time. I said at the time when we were agreeing this a couple of years ago that I thought it was a massive waste of time and money. It would make no difference to the people of Lymington and Pennington or the wider forest whatsoever. That initial bid promised 50,000 plus jobs. To see the latest estimate now says 16,000 with only 7,000 in the New Forest. And for that, we've given up effectively Dibden Bay to ABP. We have £4.6 million seed capital not spent at Fawley Waterside. We're seeing further underspend of seed capital at the other sites. And also with the retained business rates, which was the big thing for this council, this retained business rates pool, that we were really worried because the previous scheme we were not sure of the funding for. We'll get, by the looks of it, 95,000 a year for local rates by 2029. That's the higher end of the estimate, the projection. Again, I don't trust a single projection from the Freeport at this moment because of the previous issues. I just don't think it's worth it. And I really think it's a disgrace and it's unacceptable that this council, I think, has been hoodwinked by the promise of great riches and has been left very much out of pocket and underserved by this proposal. It's a massive waste of time and money. I said this at the time, and Liberal Democrat councillors said it at the time, but they weren't listened to. And I think it was because, obviously, the Conservative council were listening to a Conservative government that were very keen on this proposal. And I don't think it's worked, and I don't think it's going to work. And I'm sorry, but I just think it's been a massive waste of time and money.
I mean, Chair, I can only come back so much on that because obviously it's an opinion about a national programme. So it's probably not for me to say whether or not the National Freeport Programme is one that politically should be supported or not.
I don't think it's fair to ask them. Yeah, no.
Clearly, there are severe issues, severe under-delivery or over-promising previously, which is what we said at the time. I'll put this on. I'm not asking about the political ramifications for you, because that's for the council to live with, but the underspend which you raised, the under delivery in terms of jobs, or the over promising of the jobs, and also the fact that we don't really know the long-term future for the Freeport. So long-term projections about how the Freeports are going to operate. We've got a new government that we don't know whether or not they're going to support it long-term. There is a massive amount of risk here. And so every time we do an update on the Freeport, every time it just feels like a disappointment. And I just want to know,
have you got a question?
Yeah, I'm literally just about to ask it. Is about the risk analysis that we're doing constantly as a council, and whether we're looking at how this is going to evolve in the future. I think we've thrown all our eggs into this basket. We're now in a position where if the Freeport fails, if the Freeport goes, what's the outcome for this council?
So I don't think there's a downside to land within the New Forest being designated within a Freeport. I cannot see a downside to that, because what you're doing is bringing incentives to attract inward investment into the area. The Freeport doesn't have any powers outside of offering up those incentives. So if you're talking about, for example, Dibden Bay, ABP could have brought Dibden Bay back to the planning process. The Freeport doesn't have any planning powers over above everybody else. So the normal processes will be followed through for any site coming forward through the planning process, for example. So the only thing that the Freeport is bringing to our area is incentives for people to come invest here. Now, whether or not the bid that was put in reflects how that outcome is achieved, time will tell. But there isn't a disadvantage for us being part of a Freeport that says, well, this is 100% and we achieve 80% or 120% of that figure. It is still a huge benefit for this area that we are in a Freeport area. It's a chance for businesses to invest here. I don't know where the figure of 50,000 came from. The figure that was put in the full business case that went to government as part of the bid and therefore would have been signed off as part of the process, the jobs figure in that was around about 16,000. That's back to in 2022 when that was submitted. Obviously, New Forest District Council is not delivering the Freeport. The Freeport company is the company that needs to be held to account as to whether or not the Freeport is successful. What we are trying to do is making sure, however successful the Freeport is, that the benefits are felt for the residents and the businesses for the New Forest. And that's why we're putting that plan together to say, well, actually, if there are hundreds of millions of pounds being reinvested through retained business rates, let's make sure they're reinvested in a way that really benefits our residents and businesses. So I don't, absolutely, it's a political conversation to say, is the Freeport the right tool to do this across the country? But in terms of us being part of a Freeport here, I can only see upside to that. And I think, we really want to drive the investment that can potentially bring.
Follow up on that quickly is how much money are we planning to further spend as part of this process?
Well, I'm not sure the district council has particularly spent money on the Freeport process other than opposite time to see. I'm looking at Alan a little bit.
Yeah, I was going to say I can confirm. So the council put in 3 lots of £50,000 during the development stage, and obviously that was at the point of getting to full business case. Other than that, it's obviously just officer and member attendance at the varying board meetings and committee meetings. So no further cash being put in by the council.
Thank you.
Alex?
Thank you. I think Councillor Davies has sort of hit on a lot of points that I wanted to raise, so I'll try not to sort of repeat it. But as a waterside councillor, as a Hyde and Dibden councillor, what really concerns me about the project is that when Dibden Bay came back last time, NFDC backed us. They supported us, and although it's not NFDC's planning decision, it has to go to government for the decision. Having NFDC on the side of the Hyde and Dibden community meant a lot. Everything that I've heard and I've read and I've heard from council officers suggests you're not going to back us. And my concern is that there's a significant amount of our community, I won't say all, but a significant amount of our community that have great concerns about Dibden Bay being developed. Not even to the fact that there is simply not the way of accessing there that won't impact on the roads. you know, the Waterside Railway has now had the funding pulled, which will have a detrimental impact. And the fact that we've lost Forley Waterside for housing.
Can you get to the question, please?
I mean, to be fair, you've let Councillor Davis speak for. I'm actually a local ward member near this area. And my concern is that the 7,000 jobs that have been predicted still, I don't have the confidence they'll come from the local area, because a huge pool of development that was going to be there is not guaranteed there. So it's just going to add to the amount of influx. So my main concern is, where is the scrutiny within all these groups of someone who actually might not have a complete positive view of the project? Yes, you've got the audit. Yes, you've got Portsmouth City Council doing their part, but you need to have someone who will look and poke the holes and say, actually, realistically with this project, these challenges are happening, these things are changing. We don't want to go gung-ho on it and make it the sole approach. I mean, in our corporate plan, the economy is solely built around the Freeport, and there's a lot of concern that particularly local residents, that this strategic reserve will have a detrimental environmental and daily impact on the community I represent, and I'm concerned that NFDC support is gone for us at the planning.
I'll go back to the Freeport presentation. The Freeport itself doesn't have any tool that it's bringing to this that in somehow railroads this through local communities and so on. The Freeport is simply a designation that allows the Freeport to give incentives to investment. There is no other tool that's available to the Freeport to do that. So whatever processes, if there was no Freeport and ABP were literally just coming forward and saying, we want to resurrect the discussion around Dibden Bay, then that's the process that will be followed. So Tim may want to say something around that planning process, but it's no different whether the Freeport's here or not, unless Tim says something different. The issue around skills, I think, is a really important one. You know, we are, you know, a lot of the Freeports are in areas with very high, well, not very high, but you know, significant levels of unemployment. That's slightly less the case here. So I think the case here is more around the mismatch between demand and supply of skills. So I think some of the work that we're just kicking off now is really looking at what are the challenges that residents within the New Forest have that might prevent them accessing not just jobs through the Freeport, but jobs in the, you know, whether that's in the tourism industry, whether it's in SMEs, whether it's in you know, town centre economies, whatever it might be, that we use the funding coming through the Freeport for skills to invest in our people to make sure they have the access to those jobs over the next 20 years or so. Now that is a you know, a big undertaking, because I think it's you know, some of those jobs are a long way off. So you're starting to talk about, you know, your work with schools and your work with head teachers, and so already starting to have those conversations about, you know, what are the unique challenges within this district? Is it around isolated communities? Is it the fact that we don't have a university and therefore people disappear off and then don't come back? All of those sorts of conversations are taking place through that delivery plan, and skills are absolutely front and centre to what we're trying to achieve through that legacy. But Tim, I don't know if you want to say any more about the kind of planning side of things.
It's working. Everyone here. Just two very quick points, Chair, if I may. The first one is that the Council does have an approach set out in its adopted local plan relating to any development south of Marchwood, north of Dibden, policy Econ 4 in the adopted local plan of July 2020. So just to reassure members that there is an approach set out there. The second point really at a high level is just that we do have a report going to Cabinet, or due to go to Cabinet next month, which will set out this Council's proposed approach to involvement in such projects. So we'd encourage members just to keep an eye on the path of that and to look at the papers when they're published. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I just want to comment and thank you for the presentation. We cannot be seen to be so small-minded about these things. We have to be engaged with the systems that are in place in order to make sure we get the education, the funding, the health and everything else we need to do long-term. It is a long-term thing. So thank you very much.
Sorry, I won't cover this obviously in my leader's announcements. I was actually at a Freeport board meeting last night. I am the representative for New Forest District Council. Before the election, it was bandied about if a different government come in, will they scrap the Freeport? And we've had long conversations on that about how it would affect this and that. Last night, again, we touched on the subject, and some of the Freeport board have already met with the new government, and it appears they are not going to disband the Freeport. They fully support the Freeport, so if that gives you any, confidence in it, it will be continuing. As the council representative, I am passionate, and Clive knows I am passionate, about getting whatever we can for our residents, be that education, job applying when your old job is finished and you need, to restructure your life, work, colleges, education, funding, parks, whatever I can influence, I will put my absolute heart and soul into it. And to me, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity, and I am never going to give up on it. So.
Thank you, Joan. Thank you, Clive, for that update. Thank you. We'll move on now to portfolio honours update. Would you like to continue, Joan?
Right. Panel have heard some very interesting presentations today on areas within my portfolio. I'm particularly pleased to have taken to council and gained approval for the funding to take forwards the future New Forest transformation programme. It's great, really great, to see the team now in place to deliver the programme with an in-house model that we have always felt was best for us. I'm also pleased to be able to update the panel, having approved the corporate plan and key performance indicators. I'm assured that we are now finalising our service plans across the council, which will be made available to all members once finalised. This brings together priorities, performance, risk and resources at a service level. I've also been busy in my role representing the council. Members will be aware that the new government has invited upper tier authorities to consider submitting an expression of interest for a devolution deal. Cheer up, Jack. Come on, get with the programme. Although district councils don't have a formal say on this, we have been invited to discussions taking place across Hampshire and the Isle of Wight, and I will ensure that where we can be, we are involved and representing the unique interests of our forest.
Yes, Jack.
Devolution deals, don't we just love them? I assume this is going to include a mayor for Hampshire or whatever they're doing now, in which case can I ask the usual request that I always ask of you, which is to tell them that we respectfully decline or respectfully don't want a mayor for Hampshire, that we want to make sure that councils are not stripped of any powers, or mid-tier councils, principal authorities are not stripped of any powers, because the last thing we want is for them, the government, to say they've devolved powers to counties, and for councils like the New Forest District Council and town parish councils to have their powers stripped from them.
I think you'll find there is no choice in a mayor system. Again, this is all being discussed at county level. But devolution is different this time. It's not trying to...
Very shameful.
It's not trying to strip away powers and do away with district councils. It appears to me that it is another level coming in of government. Am I right, Kate? I am, aren't I? Yes.
So can I just, so what does that, so what's the point in getting a mayor then? What's the mayor going to do?
The government are wanting a single voice to talk to, so they are not going round all the councils having 1,001 meetings. They want one voice to be able to speak and represent a whole area. Now, like it or not, if it means we get access to more funding, then a mayor role, we will go. But I, as a district council, are probably not going to have a voice in this.
I just think that's nuts, but, you know, each to their
That
own.
is your political opinion. Mine is obviously different.
Often is.
Kate, do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, and I think you'll know from other combined authorities and devolution deals that they have got different powers within them. The whole approach that the sector is trying to achieve is to secure more devolution of powers from central national government to a local level, even if that is regional. There could be a joining together of some more likely regional functions in terms of they're often looking at strategic transport. The government has mooted in its MPPF the idea of regional spatial planning, but you know, we don't know where they're going to go with that. So at the moment, they focus particularly on the growth-related areas. I mean, some like Manchester have gone further with the police and crime sort of commissioner functions, and also including health to a degree. So I think you can see why it's frustrating for districts, because we feel that we're absolute drivers of growth. But a lot of the conversation and the government, you know, the government and the officials are only meeting Hampshire County, Southampton, Portsmouth, and the Isle of Wight. So the districts are, you know, welcome the opportunity to be involved in the conversation. I think the other thing about directly elected mayor, just to note, the new government have stopped 2 county deals going forwards, which were under the previous model, didn't have directly elected mayors. And they've specifically stopped those deals going forwards and told them to rethink. So part of it is about working to understand what's going to be in place for the next few years and how that works for all of the residents across the locality.
Thank you very much. Yes.
Yeah, thank you for that update. I do share sort of Councillor Davies' scepticism, but following on from the conversation where you've just said how much you'll go and bat for our community on another project we might not agree in, I would urge you to just, where possible, do the same here. Because with the greatest respect, our district is not the same as Southampton and Portsmouth, and even different to Eastleigh. And the challenge in such circumstances is that making sure that actually we don't lose funding, and it's not misunderstood that New Forest is not a well-off district. It's not full of areas of deprivation, not full of urban areas where actually we have food banks, we have citizen advice supporting huge swathes of families and young people and older people, and that actually it's not forgotten that we certainly shouldn't lose anything, that we need to gain from this. And if it's a mayor, it's fine, it's going to be beyond our control, but that anyone who has to represent Hampshire has to ensure that they're representing an entire county and not just those with the loudest voices. So if it's going to be mayor, I think that's beyond our control, but please go to bat for us, because I've genuine concerns it's misconstrued.
Alex, do you have a question for the portfolio holder?
That's it. I go to bat.
Can I really reassure you, I have talked at length, just because we have thatched cottages, little country lanes, donkeys, pigs and horses roaming the district, we are not a rich district. Because of the breadth and the difference through the district, we have a lot of deprivation areas. We have a lot of underskilled people. We have a lot of areas we want to improve, town centres, schools we want to improve. We want better education. We want to get people back into employment. And they have now said, yes, Jill, we've heard you before. So it is a passion. I will continue with it. And I promise to give it all of my heart, strength and passion, believe me.
Thank you, Jill. Okay, Jeremy.
Thank you, Chairman. I think that what we've seen through the whole of this meeting, particularly, is the diversity of the challenges that face this district and the fast-moving world in which we live. There are discussions coming up and being brought forward that certainly 10 years ago would never even have been considered. I'll work through our agenda because I kind of put my portfolio around that. Citizens Advice New Forest. I think we all in this room realise what a vital service they deliver to the people of the district and how we need to support them. But, and I hear Jack's proposal of a 5-year cycle, but we live in a very, very fast-moving and changing game, not only in what they deliver to our community, but in how they support this council. We are putting in funding from our taxpayers, our residents, to deliver for our people around here. And that is changing. A lot of what they provided very early on in their service used to be around the revs and benefits that we administer and ran. But that is changing with the rollout of universal credit. And as their role changes, I think it's important that we look at that in the round and look to make sure that we deliver our money, our taxpayers' money. It's not ours. We don't own it. We are just administrators of this to deliver the best for the forest. So I think that probably a 5-year settlement would possibly take that too far in such a changing world. But the Cabinet will review all those decisions. On our procurement, I was interested, I've really enjoyed this debate today. On our procurement, again, there were concerns about controlling our money, ensuring that any changes come. But that, again, any changes in the contract are properly covered under our financial regulations. But against that, and there is another side, is the fact that what you don't want is a delay in a contract to deal with too much bureaucracy. Now, again, you must manage your money sensibly, but because that delay can deliver on money. So again, not a straightforward, one-sided decision. And then I come to our transformation programme. I think that started at the start of COVID. I mean, everyone's saying that this is our transformation programme, but the world changed with COVID and the way that we worked. And that has not only meant the difference in the way people deliver on a job, it changed in where they deliver it from and how they see it. We have put forward, we are trying to move towards a 24/7 society, where 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and it was mentioned, you know, if a tree falls down on Saturday morning, can I do anything about it in the same way that I could do something about it if it fell down on a Monday morning? Well, at the moment you can report, we have a lot more reporting online, but it is simply, at the moment, it is kind of a bit of a dead end. It's a sort of thank you for your call. It is important to us and we will get back to you shortly. What we need to move through to is something that actually begins to deliver the services over that 24/7 period, but again reflects the staff's working patterns and the right to have, you know, time off. So it is a very important stream of work. It will see a lot of changes, not least in the accommodation here at Appletree Court. But again, looking at our assets and the town hall did light up as a beacon. It is a beacon. It is going to be a significant change to Lymington, whatever we do there. But one thing is certain, what is there now does not deliver value for money for the community. Not the community of Lymington, not the community of the New Forest. And there will have to be changes. Those changes have to accommodate all the hopes and aspirations of this council, but also the concerns of the local residents and the changes. Yeah, I sympathise with you. We had the same issue. Our Ringwood and Fordingbridge Rural Town District Council turned into an outpost for New Forest District Council and is now an old people's home. So I do feel for you on that one, and we will be looking to deliver for the people of Lymington as well as the people of New Forest when that comes forward. If I'm still in the role of portfolio holder, as that goes forward, I will be well aware of that. Salient free ports, we're going to have to disagree, I'm afraid. We have a unique challenge with our free port. An awful lot of free ports across the country were in a single authority site. We go across Southampton, Portsmouth. The only bit we don't really touch is Hampshire, isn't it? It's quite unique in that stage. But it was vital, not just for us, but for our partners, that went forward. We have worked very hard, and in a number of cases, I think we have had some significant wins to ensure that it will support the people of the New Forest should it go forward. But it was vital. We held the key between, I think, that being a deliverable free port or not. That would not only have impacted on us, it would also have impacted, as I say, on Southampton and Portsmouth. So I think it was vital that we went forward and supported that. I share your frustration in the speed and the delivery. I equally share your concerns about the impact that some of that will have on the water side. Unfortunately for me, I have had a daughter who's defected to that side of the forest. I don't know why she chose to defect to that side of the forest, but she has. And so now, on a very regular basis, I see and share the frustration of the waterside people travelling down that corridor. So whether you lot thought about this and bribed her into it so I would be able to fully understand and appreciate the concerns that you have, I don't know, but it's working very well if that's what we're. We do have to ensure that as the free port is delivered, but as we've already heard, there were already afoot that we cannot canute this, cannot canute it, we cannot hold back the change. We have to work very hard to make sure that that change delivers for our residents. And again, the introduction of funding and support, I know the frustration of some people over the railway, Waterside Railway and its concerns. I still, every time everyone talked about it, I still could not cope with how they were going to deal with more trains going through Totton and the crossings. And until someone told me a solution to that, I can't say I was 100% behind it. I like trains, especially if we could have steam ones again, but I think that's not a chance of that one. But I still think that project had significant downsides to it, as well as some upsides, and those downsides were not being addressed. I think there was a certain level of romantic love for history rather than the grim realities of modern day society. I think I will probably leave it at that. Thank you, Chairman. Take any questions. Oh, one tiny little thing I just want to add. Obviously, at full council, there was the discussion from the question that was put forward about the collection of council tax. You will look, if you look at our reports, that we continue to hit, and that showed the significant amounts of money that our Revs and Benefits team deal with and on behalf of the new residents of the New Forest. You will see that we continue year on year to hit our targets, and I am really very grateful to that team, and so should every member. So despite those huge numbers, we are a very high performing council in our collection rates, and we also have, I think, support our more vulnerable members in society when issues do arise on that matter, which is equally, I think, as important. Thank you.
Thank you. Due to the time, can we keep the questions short, please?
I just firstly, I like Jeremy, so I'm going to be nice to him. Firstly, always a good report, Jeremy. On the usual question I ask, funding settlement. We've got a new government. Have we got any extra money?
No.
Great. I thought that might be the case.
I think we continue to have challenging times, and I'm as concerned as every member in this chamber would be over what that is going to impact on our funding in the long term.
Thank you. I did have another one, but I've forgotten it, and as time constraint, I will not press.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alice.
David's got my question again. So my question is also on funding. It's about making sure that, I don't know, if we write to the local housing and local government department on having a multi-year fund is my concern. I appreciate, because the last few years it's been piecemeal, it's been year on year. We can't plan ahead for that. And as much as members of your family want to be in the best ward in the district, which is mine, I think all over the district we need to have that security long term. And I do sympathise with yourself and the officers on that, because we haven't had that with the last government, because it was...
It's a never delivered on promise, isn't it? And I agree with you entirely. As a level of certainty on our funding would make our life considerably better. We keep prudent reserves because obviously we need to, because there are ever-changing factors. And so, yes, a multi-year settlement would make us, even a settlement that was delivered with a reasonable level of timescale would severely help us. I mean, talk about pulling teeth when they're deciding what they're going to deliver to you. It is something else. And I always feel simply for our team as we're trying to finalise our budget on still projected income rather than cast iron certainty. Oh, and one other thing, as was said in this chamber many years ago, if the forest gets a mare, then it should have a stallion.
Thank you very much, Jeremy. Thanks for your report. Quickly move on to item 9, which is the work programme. As in the notes, nobody's got any comment on that. Good. There's some future dates on the bottom of the agenda, just for your note. Okay. And I haven't got any other items. And thank you much for your long delay. I think we should bring sandwiches next time.